So there's this moment after you're in the embassy where now you're no longer a US citizen, but you're not yet a Singaporean. So you're a stateless person.
Meet Ron Kaufman, a New York Times bestselling author and ex-American who is now a Singaporean citizen. Invited by the Singapore government in 1990, Ron has since significantly improved the service levels at numerous companies like Singapore Airlines, Changi Airport and Marina Bay Sands. We explored Ron's experience of renouncing American citizenship, the differences between American and Singaporean dreams, and his personal encounter with Lee Kuan Yew. I'm Max, let's begin.
I had my moment with Lee Kuan Yew.
Please
So
tell
this
me.
is after he stepped down as prime minister, minister mentor, and it was January 1st in early 2000s. And my wife and daughter and I were out walking, and we were down by the Merlion, walking along that Fullerton Bayfront. And they were a bit in front of me, and suddenly both of them spun around, and they said to me, "Did you see that?" And I looked and said, "See what, see what?" And they said, "That's Lee Kuan Yew." And, I turned, and sure enough, there was LKY, and he was surrounded on all four corners by people who were guards. And they weren't dressed in a military style, but it was obvious that these are four guards. And I said, "I'm going to go say hello." And my wife is always very careful. She goes, "You better not." But that's not my style. So I was already turned, boom, and I'm heading off in that direction. And I'm walking up really quickly to catch up. And the guard behind Lee Kuan Yew could just sense that I was coming. I mean, he was just had that sense. And very gently went like this, just sort of, stay back. But I had momentum. So I said, "I just want to say thank you." And the guard's hand went like this, just like a sine wave. Just waved me right up. And I walked up and I greeted Mr. Lee and I thanked him for his vision and his commitment and all he'd done for the country. And he's taller than I am. And he looked down at me, he goes, "Where are you from?" I said, "United States, sir." He goes, "Why are you here?" And I said, "I'm here to raise the quality of customer service throughout the whole nation." He goes, "Good, stay." That was it. We wished each other Happy New Year, and he went on his way. Two really, really key lessons out of that. Number one, the guy was on mission all the time, on purpose, on focus. Like he was happy to meet me, happy to receive my thanks and congratulations, but he wanted to know what I could do for him and what I could do for the country. Boom, stay. But the other was, look at that guard. Right? Service is taking action to create value for someone else. That's a lesson that I wrote. I teach it all over the world. And when the guard first sensed me coming, and stay back, he was serving Mr. Lee. But when he realized who I was and what I wanted to do and what I wanted to say, by letting me in, he created more value for me, but also for the person he was protecting.
Yeah, and he was probably taught to behave this way.
A great service provider.
You've been living in Singapore for 32 years, right?
32.
Do you remember your first impressions of the city? What was different, like versus America, let's say?
Well, it was the Asian local nature, for example, of the cuisine. So that you can go out to a hawker stall and find multiple styles and flavors right next to each other. And it was cooked a moment before it was served to you. This is not the American style for dining, for example. The people themselves interact differently. There's a different kind of housing here. It's much more dense. To get equivalent density, you'd have to go to a city in the United States. And American cities, and Singapore as a city back then, quite different, because this one grew up out of the kampongs. Kampong's spirit is that one of we are here together. We've got to figure out how to get along with each other. And of course, just before the founding of the nation, where there was some real tension and difficulty socially, is a big reason why Singapore said, wait, we have to invent something called Singaporean. We need to literally create a way of being, a society, a commitment to one another that is based on, as you know, Singapore, meritocracy, excellence, service, no corruption, and mutual respect.
I'm sure you read the book of Lee Kuan Yew and you know what he's done for your country now. What's the main key takeaways you can pinpoint from this book, from his knowledge and his experience?
Well, the man's life has been very well documented and well studied by many people, and for good reason. My understanding is that this was a human being who saw an opportunity and a responsibility. Very intelligent guy, very, very capable. And it wasn't just him, it was the team of people around him and the team of people around that civil service and political leaders, etc. But his commitment was to create value. And so where do you create value? You start at home, and then you extend out to your community. And then if your community can become a country, and then you're concerned about the region, and then within the region, you're in the world. Singapore is so small, it cannot afford to have an enemy, okay? You have this tiny little island that is a Chinese, Indian, Muslim, Malay, expat mix in a neighborhood that is a lot bigger and diverse, okay? So you've got to sail this thing really. In fact, one of his kakis, one of his key people that supported him, a man named Lim Kim San, I met him when he was the executive chairman of Singapore Press Holdings. So all the media, the newspapers, etc. And at the time, he was also chairman of the Port of Singapore Authority. Yeah, so all the ships. And I was doing some work for SPH, Singapore Press Holdings. And I was interviewing, starting from the beat reporter and the photographer and the guys who sold advertising and laid out the paper, all the way up to executive chairman's office. And they brought me that day to have the interview with him. I sat down. I was young. I'd only been in Singapore less than a year. And I asked him some question. I don't remember what it was. And he looked at me across the table. It was just he and I in the office. And he banged his fist on the table.
Oh.
And he goes, "Always remember this, young man." Yes, sir. He goes, "Our country doesn't have the ballast that your country has." He was talking about the United States. Yeah. And he said, if one fraction of what's happening in your country today were ever to happen here, and that was the day when a helicopter captured on camera a policeman beating Rodney King in Los Angeles with a brick during a race riot. Yeah. Okay? And he said, if that ever happened here, one fraction of it, the next day, all the expats are gone on the airplanes, and with a few keystrokes, all the money is gone. He said, we have to sail this small ship with a very firm hand on the sail and on the tiller. And in that moment, I realized, oh my God, you have this tiny, vulnerable, no natural resources, no agricultural hinterland, no oil reserves. What have you got? People on a rock, and you better get along with everybody. That's a big challenge. And Mr. Lee looked at that and said, okay, we have people, let's optimize this.
I watched one of your videos where you showed two passports, like American passport, like full of visas, like this size, yeah, and Singapore passport. I was
also packed.
Also packed. I was like, oh, you have two passports, or because when you become Singapore citizen, you should like.
Yes, yeah. So when I became a Singapore citizen in 2013, it meant that I could no longer be a U.S. citizen.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I did that.
Was it like emotions were involved into this decision?
Okay, thank you for asking this question. There's a moment when, in the American treatment of it, you have what's called a renunciation of citizenship, of nationality. And so it's at the American embassy, and it's quite a serious choice.
Yeah.
Yeah. People always ask me, was it hard to give up? Was it hard to give up? And for me, yes, it was hard, but it wasn't that I was giving up something. I was choosing something. I moved here when I was 34. I'm 67 now. So my entire adult life really has been in this society with the privilege of contributing to it. So I was choosing being Singaporean, not rejecting being American. And if I could have kept both, I probably would have. Yeah, in fact, I'm sure I would have. Yeah. But Singapore doesn't allow that. So there's this moment after you're in the embassy where now you're no longer a US citizen, but you're not yet a Singaporean. So you're a stateless person. And you get into the taxi or the car, and you go from U.S. Embassy over to Singapore, okay? You're immigration authority, and they're waiting there, and they've got your passport because they know that it's all happening, right? And I got there, and it was an emotional moment. And there's this one moment where you raise your hand, you make the pledge, and you sign.
In Singapore.
In Singapore. Yeah. And there's this one person who's from immigration authority sitting opposite me, and I'm doing all the paperwork, and I say what I need to say, and she goes, okay, that's it. Like, no, wait. And I said to her, all I needed her to say was something like, welcome, or congratulations, or we're glad you're here. Anything. One line would have been enough, right? Fortunately, immigration is one of my clients, right? So then we can go in and say, hey, that's an example of a moment where procedurally, structurally, everything is done, everything is correct. Where's the emotional side of creating value for someone else? And of course, now they've gotten much better at that.
How does it work when you renounce an American citizenship? So it's just a paperwork, you just sign, that's it?
Oh, no. It's you have to do a couple of meetings at the U.S. Embassy. One where you say, I have this intention. And they go, oh, okay, and go think about it. And you have to come back another time. A two-stage process.
Are they trying to change your mind?
I would say that everyone who works for a government anywhere in the world is, or definitely should be, incredibly proud of that entity. And do all they can to continue to cultivate either a sense of loyalty to or appreciation for. And so one of the things that was interesting in my case is because, clearly I'm not doing it for any reason other than I'm Singaporean. I've been here all these years. This is my life and my future. So I intend to stay here and contribute to the community here until the end of my days. And so there was a woman who I was having the conversation with, and when it was all done, she looked at me, she goes, good luck to you. And she wasn't saying like, okay, good luck to you.
Yeah.
No, it was an authentic human understanding.
Americans are more open normally. Like I generalize, but let's say if you compare Asians to Westerners.
For sure.
Was it difficult for you to get used to this kind of like how people interact with each other, like more in a shy way, let's say, calm
So
way?
there's a certain freedom to being an expatriate for anyone, anywhere in the world. You're an expatriate. The people you interview are also expatriates, even when they become Singapore citizens. And so all of the domestic expectations, all of the social standards, the behavioral styles that anyone growing up in that environment is naturally acculturated to, they don't apply, right? You want to be respectful of them, but they're not really yours. And so there's a freedom in that.
Yeah.
Right? Then I don't look Asian.
Yeah.
So then people look at me right away and assume it's going to be something different. But the sensitivity, the desire to adapt, the desire to contribute value then means that it's on the expat to become a lot more sensitive to the local environment.
Yeah. So people are more easy on you if you look differently. It's like
Easy, but also tougher in a different way. Because it's just as easy for somebody from the local society to go, that person's not one of us.
yeah. What do you think America can learn from Singapore?
Mutual respect. Got to learn to get along. I think there is a point at which capitalism's metric, how big is your number? You know, the end justifies the means, not always. It's not that it burns out, but it can burn the society. So if there's things that you can do that just make money and you didn't break the law, then go for it. Well, what's the community impact? And when I say community impact, is like, what's the impact not only on customers, but also on your own staff? What about on your staff's family? What about on the community from which both your customers and your staff come from? Yeah. What about the ecology that supports the community and the customers and the colleagues and their families and their staff? So that kind of responsibility, again, when you're Singapore, you're tiny. So every square foot is something that needs to be really looked at responsibly.
There is this American dream that if you work hard, you can achieve anything you want, like career-wise or business-wise.
That's true here too.
Yeah, in Singapore also, I think the society super driven by being successful in a materialistic way, being successful with money.
I would say that that's changing right now. So the 5 C's that existed when I came, I may not get all of them, but it was cash, credit card, condo, car,
club,
country club, right? And now you can talk to young people and they're actually more interested in care, concern, compassion, contribution, community. Yeah. I mean, another set of C's. I'm not saying that they're not chasing success. Many of them are. And when you're a young person, go for it. That's what you're supposed to do in life. Yeah. You know, build up security, family, identity, and money. But not only. What is your contribution to society?
Feels like Singapore is a great mix of this, like let's say family values, society values, plus like money, like material success.
And you said, you know, family values, society values, like yes, family, but not only family. From family to community and then from community to world. Yeah. So Singapore is really unique in that regard because it's so tiny and yet it obviously plays far above its weight. Yeah. Yeah. So then what position can it take in ASEAN? For example, what position can it take in the United Nations, for example? What position can it take in any global conversation, whether it's about funds, whether it's about ecology, whether it's about geopolitics, whether it's about whatever it's about? Yeah. Singapore can get a seat at the table. You're only 5 million people. You're one little island. How do you do that? You do that by quality.
Yeah. We have this motto on this channel, like we help to close the gap or make the gap smaller between like understanding gap, let's say between locals and foreigners. What would be your advice, like how to close this gap so locals can understand foreigners better and vice versa?
I really think the key has to do with respect, curiosity and respect. There are things about the culture you'll never fully understand. But how curious are you? How quickly are you ready to make a judgment, an assessment, an opinion? Or are you willing to sit back and go, wow, what do I not yet know? What question could I ask? How could I learn? How could I even listen to the answer somebody's giving me without throwing a judgment right away? And it goes in both directions. So local Singaporeans can also be quite curious about what is the background that you come from, that you're joining the society, as much as expats have a responsibility. Because we're the ones moving here to say, let me learn about all of the different local elements of culture.
Do you speak any Singlish?
Oh, I can teach in Singlish.
Oh, yeah?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
I can do a keynote speech, start to finish, the whole thing in Singlish.
Oh, wow. That's so cool. Do you speak any like Bahasa or Mandarin?
A bit, just tiny. It's not an area that I've become strong in. I speak French, but that was from high school and college days.
Yeah.
Singaporeans, I think, are the most efficient on the planet in terms of use of language. So I was in a meeting and this woman was pitching something to the boss, and then she goes, kana. Right? And I realized she just distilled the question, so what do you think of what it is that I've proposed, and should we be able to proceed, or do you think we should? No, she just said, kana. And a Singaporean recently pointed out to me that you could make that 1/3 even more efficient just by saying, can or not.
Yeah. I think that's actually how Singapore is distinct, like foreigners of like locals. If you go to local school, let's say, you're perceived more local. Or if you speak Singlish, if you just learn to speak English, you are kind of perceived more like a local.
Yeah.
I think some foreigners they don't try, they don't enough to get involved.
It's an important choice because expats can live in a bubble, in an expat community, and go to all the expat clubs, and nothing wrong with that. It's a choice. But anybody who chooses to become part of the Singapore society in a different way, there's just this incredible richness.
Yeah.
My wife, for example, goes to the wet market, and she loves to go several times a week, and every single person who has a stall there is one of her aunties or uncles. And so she's not going for the tomato and the avocado, she's going for the relationship with these people, and it's become quite close.
You've done a lot of things like to improve service
Yes.
like in this country. How would you like rate the service industry in Singapore?
I tell you a story about the police. It was one of the first groups that we worked with when we came here. The police had a certain reputation of, enforcement, that's part of their job. But there's also this very intimate relationship with the community that you want to be more collaborative, more cooperative, so that you get citizen initiatives, so you get the sense of neighborhood responsibility, not like it's the government's job.
Yeah.
And I remember there was one day somebody said to me, the police here are changing. I said, why do you say that? And he said, well, I saw somebody whose car broke down on the side of the road, and there were 2 police helping to push it off the highway and down the ramp. And the guy with the car was in the car driving. And there it is, service taking action to create value. Even for example, the prisons department, who we've done work with.
Oh.
You think prisons, okay, your job is to incarcerate people. No, they literally say, our mission is to get people out of prison.
Yeah.
So it's all about rehabilitation and community integration and development of skills and self-respect and a sense of dignity and responsibility.
Yeah.
That's a different way of living and being.
How do you think Singapore shaped your personality after these 32 years in the country?
For 29 years, I flew on almost 100 flights a year. Okay, just my career turned into a global keynote speaker and a consultant and trainer working all over the world. And always coming back to Singapore, Changi Airport, coming back to Singapore, safe. My wife and daughter can walk in the evening on the street and not have to worry. Singapore, go out to the hawker stall and have whatever kind of flavorful food you want, see people being respectful of one another, made me as an even better global citizen. Because now I'll go anywhere else in the world and I'm not there to assert myself. I'm there to listen, to learn, to appreciate, to be curious about, to ask questions. I've become even more curious than I was when I first came here because I was an American going to Singapore. What a diverse place. Now I'm a citizen of an incredibly diverse place going out into an even more diverse world.
Are you leaving? Wait, enjoy this video first. But it's gone in 3, 2, 1.